for this evening. I'll just mention a few of the other events coming up every Friday until the end of term. If you're not on our mailing list and you would like to be to understand events this term, but also following terms, just to go online and look for the Oxford Nature Network, and you'll find the email there to register for our mailing list. So the speakers we have the next few weeks. Next week we have Christina Banks-Leachy from Imperial College London talking about what drives species sensitivity to deforestation. It's not what you think. The week after we have Sirian Sumner, Professor of Behavioral Ecology from UCL, talking about the natural capital of wasps. And she has a lovely book about wasps that I'd recommend you reading if you want to do some advanced reading for that, which she should also be doing a book signing for. The week after, we have Rosa Vasquez Espinosa from the Amazon Research International talking about the spirit of the rainforest. And the final one of term will be Robert Fish from Imperial College London on relational values and nature recovery. So quite a nice range of topics there. So do come along to those. And just slip over to introducing our speaker today, who has no slides. He's all going to be using the power of his storytelling to give his seminar. And that's Professor Jules Pretty, Emeritus Professor of Environment and Society at the University of Essex, who is a world-renowned scholar whose work bridges ecology, agriculture, and social change. And he's got over 2 decades of published books, including The Low Carbon Good Life and The Sea Sagas of the North. And you've got a little leaflet on those on your desk, where he explores how landscapes, communities, and nature interact. And he's held several leadership roles, served on several key advisory committees in government and in science, and received a range of honours, including an OBE for his contributions to sustainable agriculture and environmental policy. And deeply rooted in the belief that story and place matter, his research on green exercise, biodiversity, and regenerative farming invites us to reimagine how people live with the natural world. So, over to you, Jules.
Thanks very much. Thank you. Thanks very much, Vinda. So it's just words then today. I'm going to refer to the 2 handouts, the 30 for 30 carbon one and the 30 for 30 nature recovery one, a little bit later on, and just talk through a kind of policy story about offering people lots of options from where they sit and why that matters. So I'll come to that in a later part of this afternoon's talk. I should also say that a public announcement number 1 is that I've just launched a YouTube channel on story for climate and nature recovery yesterday. So if you want to go on and do that thing of subscribing, then I should imagine the author wouldn't mind at all. But you'll find there's 8 stories, 8 films on there that I load up on the content that we're talking about today. So what I want to do is to weave together 3 key components of climate and nature recovery: story itself, hope, and transformation. How we need to effect changes. Go ahead, guys, walk across if you want, that's fine. How we need to effect changes, big transformations, what that means for us, and how we stitch in hope in terms of what we are going to be doing. I'll point out one thing. That's the last bit when I talk about the backdrop here is clearly the crises of climate, nature, social inequality, and the tying together of those things. That's the last of the bad stuff. Okay. Over the years, I've found that people really would like to feel as though there's some hopeful paths from where we are at the moment. Okay. We work a lot on how bad things are and try to understand what that means, but I don't talk about them anymore now. I've seen too many people glaze over and kind of slump at the talk of how bad things are. So I'm looking for the way we get out of the hole. More on that in a bit. So question 1, how do we talk about climate, nature, social inequality crises without making people more anxious? That's the kind of exam question, really. How do we do that? And question 2 then is, how do we turn talk into agency so that the people feel the capability, the capacity to want to act, to want to do something. I run a commission in Essex called the Essex Climate Action Commission. It's a kind of public body, voluntary commissioners. I'm chair of it. We do a lot of work with local communities, trying just to get people to take one step and then another step, to get in the game of change, as it were, to get in the game of agency, because people know lots of stuff, but they don't know what to do. So I'm going to be trying to bridge that, come back to the handouts in a little while. In 1939, Bertolt Brecht, the playwright, librettist, writer, asks, in the dark times, will there be singing? And he says, yes, there will also be singing about the dark times. So what he meant about the singing was a form of story that even when, brackets, especially when things are really bad, that's when we need to find ways of engaging using forms of communication, because if there is a communication, there's someone singing or talking, and hopefully there's somebody listening. So we've already got a context of engagement, and we need to kind of make the best of it. So that's what he meant about that. The power of song and story to change people. We do so much for nature, and yet things have never been so depleted. That's kind of where we find ourselves at the moment. And we're using the kind of nature in the broadest sense of the planet as a whole. So story is, good story does three things. It maps the paths from where we stand at the moment. It maps multiple paths, plural, not singular. It creates agency, and it brings people together. I'm interested in the kind of the power of agency, not just for people to feel as though that they're in this by themselves, but to create that togetherness, the social capital that leads us to the position where we can make larger scale changes. When I was researching and writing the book Sea Sagas of the North, I visited 160 ports and villages around the North Atlantic, North Sea and the North Atlantic. 7 different countries, and spoke to lots of people in different communities. I spoke to an ancient mariner in the east of England who had been for 70 years on the drifters and the trawlers from East Anglia, a famed skipper, a prize winner for the biggest catch one year. And he said in good Suffolk brogue, you know, boy, to me, we were kinder and more tolerant in the days when we had the fish. And that's because the fishermen traveled from the coasts of Lowestoft and Yarmouth and the Thames Estuary 1,000 miles to Iceland, competed for the fish, stayed in ports and villages, got to know people, heard their stories, and came back home with stories, who they then came over time to consider as their friends. And then when the fish disappear, the fishermen disappear because they no longer have a reason to go to other places. And the stories get stranded completely. And then people feel as though they have no agency whatsoever. So they've seen through their lifetime a change from abundance to scarcity. And they don't know how to get from scarcity back to abundance. They haven't got a clue. We might have a few clues about that. Okay, so the ecological declines are very often tied to cultural declines as well. So we should think about how those two things go side by side. Story begins in this way. It begins in human cultures at the fireplace, at the hearth, at the end of the day, after food, the flickering shadows and light, children wide-eyed, faces upturned, listening to the stories of what's happened in the day. A very famous storyteller from the Navajo Diné, it's a guy called Yellow Man, and he said, this is from Arizona, he said, if children hear stories, they will grow up to be good people. And then he also said, if adults hear stories, they will know what to do. So there's that kind of shift from understanding into agency. in that sense. All human cultures have grown up, have come along, we've grown up within them of talking about what happens in the day, learning from the direct experiences of other people without us having to go through the risks. So story is a rehearsal for the real world without risk. Someone says, I hunted this lion, I did this thing there, I walked over the thin ice over here, and they come back and tell you about it. And we learn from that without having done the thing. And that's what human cultures have always had. That's why we've been able to develop so rapidly, as story has led directly into understanding. All traditional stories have I think, three components. They have a moral component. There's something in there about right and wrong without telling you what's right and wrong. Okay? We can impute that from the behaviors of the characters in the story, whether they're people or whether they're animals. They contain instructions for living. They're rehearsals for the real thing, as I just mentioned. So there's instruction in there. And they also tell, and this is the really big one, I think, they tell of transformations. They tell of us starting in one place and going to a new place, not just in the outer world, but in the inner world as well. So the blockages, the challenges we face may be paradigmatic, they may be the way that we think about the world. What story's trying to say to us was, you might have thought this thing, but actually this thing over here is what should happen or what could happen. And that ping, that opens something up for us. There's a transformation. Ovid, 2,000 years ago, wrote his book of 200 metamorphoses about these sorts of transformational changes. It's a book that survives 2,000 years. So human cultures have quite liked it. They've got something from it. It hasn't disappeared, it's survived. You can think of it as a kind of evolutionary selection process. It's got us to this point. Those metamorphoses are about ratchets, changes where we go from one context to another one, and there's no going back. You wash your face in the sacred well, and you sprout antlers. Now you're a deer. That's it. Your previous life is over. You're now running from the hounds as the deer. That's one story of metamorphosis. Okay? You go from small school to big school, exactly the same. Big school to college, college to a first job. The kinds of changes that happen to us in life are those big metamorphoses, and there's no going back. We might wish we could be young and slim again, but we ain't going to be. We're heading for the big thing at the end, which is even more terrifying than everything, okay? Because you don't know what's on the other side. So this is the thing about transformations. What we need now to deal with these big crises of climate and nature are heroic transformations, ones where we do stuff that we've never done before, okay? So where are we going to get the strength to do that? Where are we going to get the power to do that? Well, perhaps from other stories that tell us about how people did it. The trouble that we face, one of the challenges we face, is that today in the Anthropocene, story is often taken to be an antonym. So children are chided for telling tales. A myth is often taken to equal a lie. A story might be taken to be a fiction and therefore untrue or non-credible in some sort of way. So we use this terminology both for the good, but also for the kind of dismissive. That's just a story. It's just something that's not that important. And yet, we might call a famous actor or a sports star a legend in what they do. We use that kind of language. Or we might have a lovely weekend, a gorgeous holiday, and come back and say, it was just like a fairy tale. So we're quite happy to use the languages in certain ways, but in other ways use them as antonyms to dismiss a construction of the way the world works. So if I were to say to you these four words, you know what's coming. Once upon a time. Okay? So that's a signaler for a kind of story that's going to follow from that. A folk tale, a fairy tale, kind of language about something's now going to happen. So once upon a time, a girl is lying on the riverbank, a golden afternoon. She doesn't know what to do. She's a bit bored. And along comes a rabbit who's actually a hare, because it's the hare who's the trickster, one of the trickster characters that gets us into doing stuff. And the rabbit races down a hole and she follows him down the hole. It's a relatively recent story, 1857, Lewis Carroll. Alice goes from ordinary world up here into special world, into wonderland from the land here. So, and that's suddenly when all sorts of things happen. She takes one draft, gets tall. She takes another one, becomes small. She meets the Red Queen. The Red Queen says, why, sometimes I've believed as many as 6 impossible things before breakfast. Now that's a good way of thinking about the challenges that we face. Could we believe 6 impossible things before breakfast? And if we were to believe we could deal with them, well, there's your energy for the rest of the day. Starting the day by believing in being able to achieve impossible things. So fairy tales are always about imagination. They're amazingly resilient and persistent because we like that kind of jolt of imagination, of thinking about how people have coped with particular challenges that they face. Another girl. She's the trope from a lot of stories of Northern Europe, across Northern Europe, where there's the ash boy or the ash girl who grows up in the fireplace because that's the only place in the household that they feel safe, near the cook, it's warm, they can get some scraps of food. They are living in the cinders of the fire. So the tale of Cinderella, where she starts in the fireplace and then goes through a rapid transformation where somebody comes along, the fairy godmother, and rings a bell, and boom, she's on a new journey. And then the journey goes wrong, and then it comes right again. Cinderella is the classic tale of rags to riches. It's the most popular story in the world. There are 700 different language versions. There's one strand of them that starts in Tang, China in the 700s and comes from there. There's another version that begins in Egypt, where the girl is called Rhodopsin, and she's the red-faced girl whose slipper is taken by an eagle and dropped into the hands of the king. The China one starts with the reason why Cinderella in that story is the only one who fits the slippers is because her feet have been bound. Her feet are really small. So she's the only one who fits the slippers. So culturally, it has a different kind of thing, a behavior, a choice that lasts 1,000 years and then disappears in a generation in the last century. So Cinderella has this transformation with hope. You're in a hole, you get out of a hole. In fact, she gets out of a hole and falls in another hole and comes out again. And you could argue some versions of the story have her starting successfully in the family and then being rejected to the fireplace. So she starts in a good place and then falls in a hole again. Kurt Vonnegut, the American author, there's a gorgeous little clip on YouTube, of course, of him talking about the structure of story with a chalkboard and a piece of chalk. And he said, this is the structure of story. He draws a line and he does a curve like this, and then he draws the curve coming out again. He said, people love that story. They can't get enough of it. This is what happens. Cinderella starts here, falls in the hole, gets out of the hole. There it is. That's the structure of story. And story that's very good has lots of holes and lots of occasions when the narrative arc goes down and goes up again. Those of us who are interested in nature recovery and climate recovery, our focus is we're in the hole already. We don't need to talk about how we got in the hole. We kind of know that. Now we need to talk about how we get out of the hole. That's the central arc, the narrative arc of all good stories is we're in a hole, we get out of the hole. And then it's kind of how and what happens as a result of that. And is there another hole waiting? Yes, of course there is, because Act 4 is even worse than the first hole that you fell in. There's always something waiting around the corner. The boy Jack, the Jack cycle of stories begins in late 1600s, 1700s Britain. The cycle of stories with Jack, who becomes the giant killer, does all sorts of heroic stuff across the landscape. Jack, the giant killer, comes from a single family. His mum says, when they haven't got any resource left, take the cow to market and see what you can get. He meets an old chap on the back roads who says, I'll swap you that cow for 5 beans. And he thinks, well, that's a kind of good deal, 5 beans for a cow. Early vegetarian, you know, switch out the bad meat, dairy products. Comes back home, mum's not impressed. Sends him to bed, no food for tea. Wakes up in the morning, what's he see? The flickering green shadows through the window of the bedroom, looks outside, and there's a beanstalk out there. Well, you know what happens? He goes up the beanstalk, fights the giants, very cleverly beats them, comes back with the goose that lays the golden egg and all of the other stuff that brings riches to them. What have we got in this story? We've got the small person beating the big person. And the small person has seen the big person stomp and stamp around and have a loud voice and eat all the food and tell you what to do and doesn't listen to you. Children are recipients of stories rather than the authors of them very often. But suddenly this is different. Here's the author of the story, the small person who is able to beat the big person. That's why children love this story. That's why it survives. We don't need to say to them, you like this story because this is the psychological context of it. You tell them the story and they get it. Say, yeah, we like that. You know, small person beats big person. Very good. Okay. So that's what stories are about. Telling stuff, but letting people draw the conclusions from them. Transformation is, as I've said, the kind of central component to important stories, I think, that we will be seeking to create and engage people with. The moments, as I said earlier, that we all recognize in life. Have you ever had that wonderful day that you wish would go on forever, but yet you're also kind of unhappy because you know it won't? That's the territory of story. Okay. It's this thing and this other thing held side by side as we kind of proceed forward. Story creates those thresholds. Our question then is go or stay. That's the big bit. So all stories about this. Along comes a trickster, a guy with a big hat called Gandalf who says, go or stay. That's what he says. He says, go. Along comes Obi-Wan Kenobi, who says, go or stay. Or Scheherazade, who has to come up with 1,000 stories on consecutive nights in order not for her and her sister to be killed. Under that kind of pressure, go or stay. Keep telling the stories of transformation. That's what keeps us going. So the butterfly flaps its wings and whole systems change. Okay, that's what we're trying to do. That's what we're trying to believe in, is that small thing starts the big thing. And we're over here to begin with, and there's a threshold or a gate or a world beyond here that we don't even know exists. And someone says, open the door, go through, and off you go. Are you brave enough? There's not one path, there are 1,000 of them. So what are you going to do? So maybe we stand at the threshold for like 10 minutes or maybe 2 years, wondering whether we should go for it. Or maybe we just go for it. So where are we going to get that energy from? Well, partly from story, but partly from what other people have done from their examples. Do you remember? You might have heard of these 3 names of technology. Do you remember? Some of you won't. Some of you, maybe you all do. BlackBerry, Motorola, and Nokia. Okay. For some of us, we've probably got ancient devices in the back of the kitchen drawer that if you rooted around, you'd find them, you think, oh, crikey, one of those, eh? Blimey. You know, what's that all about? In 2007, the year that Netflix gets launched, 2007, those three companies have 98% of the world market for mobile stroke cell phones, depending on what we're calling them. 98%, right? 2007, what happens in 2007? iPhone. You've got your pods in, so you've got to, you know that answer already, Stephen. 2007, iPhone gets released. What do those people in those three companies think? They think, it's a pile of rubbish, isn't it? Rubbing your finger across the screen when you've got all of this stuff that we've developed over years. So they ignore that. Within 5 years, those three companies have 3% of the world market. Bam! They not only didn't see it coming, but when it came, they still didn't see it. So that's one of the kind of examples of change. We can look at technological change because very often it's easier to map it and to look for that transformative moment, even though somebody might have spent 20 years developing the technology kind of secretly in the background. So it's never at the moment of release. But we can look at those technological changes and say, oh, that's kind of interesting. Go or stay. Bam. Okay. Everything's suddenly changed because of this kind of one thing. So what are those one things that we're searching for? Policies, ideas of organizing people, ways of coming up with understandings of habitats, ways of getting people to get off fossil fuels, all of that kind of stuff. Here's another little question for you. What links these 7 countries? So you're looking in this direction, Iceland, Norway, Albania, Bhutan, circling around the world to Costa Rica, Paraguay, Uruguay. Iceland, Norway, Albania, Bhutan, Costa Rica, Uruguay, Paraguay. And if you really know the answer, don't give it away straight away. It's a bit unfair to say that, isn't it? What do you think? Oh, yeah, and lots more, apparently, yeah. No, good shout, Stephen. Well, that's a good shout, actually. Some of those are, definitely, yes. But that's not the thing I'm looking for. Sorry, Costa Rica doesn't have a military, Iceland doesn't, but the rest do. They're all kind of small, which I think actually is interesting, because that's a political kind of element to it. Anybody willing to have another shout? Yes, yes. That's part of the story. I'm looking for something specific. Some of them, but not all of them. Okay. Actually, that may have framed their policy that I'm thinking about here in particular. You're on the right track there. So their electricity systems are 100% from renewable sources. Those 7 countries. So they are using some fossil fuels, particularly to drive vehicles, but their electricity systems are entirely renewables. And it didn't happen by accident. They chose to do it. Every single one of those countries. So Albania in 2016 was almost all reliant on fossil fuels, gas, particularly from Russia for its electricity, decided they wanted to get out of that for political reasons. Invested in hydro in particular, but also solar. Now 100%. Almost next door, but not quite. Next country but one. Serbia, 0.2% of their electricity comes from renewables. Okay. They're completely dependent upon gas from Russia. That determines their political system and their choice set. Albania wanted to get out of that restricted choice set and invested. So with all of those, you spend money to create the kit, and then you get the energy for free, effectively. Marginal cost of renewables is almost zero, minus the maintenance costs. You make the transition and suddenly you can change. So all those countries have got it. So intention is an interesting part of the story here when thinking about what we could do next in all sorts of elements of this sphere. None of them are perfect. I'm not saying any of them are to be held up. You could tease apart Norway and their sovereign wealth fund and say, yeah, well, you got all the money for that by drilling oil and gas, didn't you? But then they would say, yeah, but we were clever. We invested it and didn't spend it. You silly lot in the UK, you spent it all, which is absolutely true. So, I mean, the choices there are, so there are ways that you can tease this apart, but the central bit is the choice set and the intention. So transformations are always about some form of kind of alchemy. You're trying to take something small and to make it big. So it's Alice in Wonderland again. Small, big. Take the potion. Okay, can we do that? Another way of thinking about this, and Tim Lenton at Exeter has led a lot on this work, really, really good book that's just come out from him on positive tipping points, but a whole kind of language about tipping points that starts about negative tipping points, how ecological systems can flip from one state to another state at a particular moment. Slow linear change, and then boom, the whole system flips to some other state and we ain't going back. So that's where the tipping point language comes from. And we kind of understand it when we're thinking about permafrost or ocean currents or Arctic ice or a whole bunch of other areas. I think there are 18 big foci for negative tipping points across the planet that people are focused on at the moment. But Tim and others are trying to create this language about saying, actually, there are positive tipping points that we can think about here, whereby we might start small, butterfly flaps its wings, a country says, we want to be 100% renewable in 5 years. Okay, go do it. That's it. Okay, bam, whole system changes. So positive tipping points are part of this kind of territory. They tell us what could happen. This is a tipping point. You're lying in your bed and a pebble strikes the window at midnight. Plink. Your world is just about to change in some way. Is it good or is it bad? You're going to go and investigate who threw the pebble or not? That's the kind of thing that happens in story, right? There's a thing happens, you didn't see it coming, bam, it happens. And now, choices. Maybe alarming ones, maybe horror, maybe not. Maybe it's an old friend who's come back again and it's wonderful. But that's the kind of territory of story. The pebble strikes the window at midnight. Let me turn a bit to a little moment or two on kind of regenerative cultures and economies. This was the subject of a paper that EJ and 29 co-authors of ours was led. So on the back of the 30 Actions for Nature Recovery, the QR code is the link to the paper. The paper is called Regenerative Good Growth. It was published earlier part of this year. And we were trying to make a point about good growth and bad growth. So bad growth is measured by GDP as being full of good things. You pollute the river, you have to spend money to clean it up. That all goes on the positive side of the balance sheet when you get to GDP. And we all know that's kind of nonsense. We've known that from the 60s, but we still do that. We're still following a pattern of growth that causes external impacts upon other systems, what economists call externalities, negative externalities. What we document in the paper is remarkable progress, expansion of a whole range of things, sort of secretly, because very often they happen from the ground up, that not necessarily these national policy decisions, and reducing costs coming down within countries. Kenya used to spend 50% of its national income on importing fossil fuels to create electricity. Kenya is now 97% renewable. You could pretty well, I could have included Kenya in that list of 7 countries, but it's not quite 100. It's 97%. Okay? So now it's not spending all that money on importing fossil fuels. Now it has other choices. It's still burning gas and diesel and fuel in vehicles, but then you have a second stage of the process is then the electrification of the fleet, and then you have to kind of think about that next step. But suddenly they've got the resource that they didn't have. Now they might make these decisions or those decisions, that's for them. I was going to say right and wrong, but it's not as simple as that, is it? But they've suddenly got resource. So regenerative cultures and economies open up resource. So we document a whole range of stuff on regenerative ag, social groups across the world, renewables, the growth of electric vehicles reaching a tipping point. Electric vehicles in 2010 in the world, there were 3,000 of them. This year, there are 60 million. The doubling period for electric vehicles in the world is about 1.5 years. That's what Tim and his colleagues have calculated. There are 1 billion vehicles in the world. So in 1.5 years, it will be 120 million. In another year and a half, it will be 240, 480, 960. So in 4 periods of 1.5 years, 6 years time, by 2031, if the growth carries on in the same way, they will have pushed out all gas and diesel burning vehicles in the world. That's a blink in the eye. Okay. All right, maybe it'd be slower. Some of these have got S-shaped curves. Yeah, it'll slow up a bit. But once we reach a certain point, it is inevitable that we stop burning gas in vehicles. It becomes renewable energy through electricity. Public opinion has changed a lot. And just to focus upon where we might be thinking about who are we going to focus upon when it comes to the sorts of changes that I was telling you about earlier on. So maybe it's not everyone at the same moment. Maybe it's people in different kinds of contexts. So there's a rule in economics. It's not really a rule. It's a kind of guideline called the Pareto rule, the 80-20 rule. So once you get 80% of a market, or 80% of people thinking in a certain way, or 80% of businesses acting in a certain way, that's your tipping point. Your target is never 100%. Once you get to 80, the system flips. So that's what's called the 80-20 rule. When you look at public opinion in most countries in the world, there has been a dramatic change pre-COVID, sort of in the kind of period after Paris Agreement in 2015 through to the pre-COVID period. Most countries in the world were around about 50, 55%, maybe 45% of people thought that climate change was real and it was caused by humans. So 5-6 years ago, that was where we are. A big study and multiple other public opinions. There was one published a few months ago of 150,000 people in 55 countries. It's now over 80% in all countries that are surveyed. People agree that climate change is real and that it's caused by humans. Those two things were often separated in the past. People say, oh yeah, it's real, but it's not caused by us. Okay, those two things have suddenly come together. It's now in the 80s. The country with the largest proportion of people who think both those things in Europe is Italy, 92%. UK, 83%. Ireland in the top 80s. Just about everywhere we look at this, we find we've shifted above this 80% rule of change. So that's interesting. And I say to people, I run story masterclasses, talking to local communities. People often come at the end sort of kind of quietly and say, what should I do about my neighbor? Or what should I do about my uncle or elderly relative? It's usually a male, problematic, making a particular point within the family, saying all of this is nonsense. And it's some young person. I've had young people in universities, young people in schools, broken apart by the narratives within families. Okay, and it's often led by one really stroppy person who wants to exert their power a bit. And I say ignore them, because they're in that 10 or 20% at the far end. We only need 80% to change whole systems. So just ignore them for the moment. Okay, let them come along later on. Don't give them your eyes. Don't give them your energy. Just let them go. In fact, I have a kind of separate line, which is actually everybody's on this journey. It's just that some people haven't started. Okay, and we can just let them go. All right, just let them be. Focus on the 80. So when we look at that 80, actually, there's 10 or 20% of people who are already doing stuff. Okay, they've made changes to behaviors and choices, consumption behaviors, diets, transport, energy, a whole range of other things. They've already started to do stuff. We have already started to do stuff. And they're in that 10 to 20%, that first, when you look at where public opinion lies. So the focus is no longer 80-20, it's 20-60-20 is a kind of rule of thumb here. Ignore that 20, let them come screaming along at some later point. Ignore them, don't give them your energy. The 10 or 20%, they don't need to be told that they should do something. They've got it. They're trying to persuade other people. Focus on the middle 60%. And that's what we call the climate majority. It's the people who know there's something wrong, they know that something needs to be done, but they don't know what to do. They absolutely don't know what to do. So this is the really big question. How do we find a way to help people cross the threshold and get in the game? So let me come to these two devices of public engagement. Sorry, folks online, but you can get these both from my website. This is not a clever way to drive you to the website, but you can get them from there. 30 for 30, cutting your carbon. This is the first one we produced 3 years ago, which was to kind of say to people, if you look on the back of the sheet, if you've got it there. Sorry, oh, you've got one there, yeah. The average production of carbon per person in the world is 7 tons per person, 8 billion people, 56 gigatons, 7 tons a person. If we can get that down to 1 ton, that's pretty well a safe place for humanity. 1 ton for 8 billion people, about 10 gigatons. We can suck up the rest in regenerative ag, in regenerative ocean and sea systems, in a number of other ways that we can capture the carbon. Our focus is on an 80% reduction from 56 to 10 gigatons. So for each of us, your challenge, our challenge, is to get from, in the UK, an average of 7.5 tons to 1 ton. If we can get to 1 ton for each of us, that's a safe place for humanity. So we produced this analysis of 30 different options to reduce your carbon profile. There are all kinds of averages going on here. People are different. It's not the same for everyone. Don't worry about that. We've done the sciencey bit in the background. I don't actually say it that way to people. I just say these are the numbers. Okay. So if you shift towards a vegetarian diet, you're going to save 0.6 of a ton per year on the average for people in the UK. Vegan, 0.7. Right. If you switch your energy supplier to guaranteed renewables, in other words, not the big companies, that's going to save 1.6 tons per year straight away. So the central point here is 2. 1, offer lots of options. 2, let people choose. Okay. 3, actually, is let people disagree and still be in the game. So when I talk to groups of farmers, livestock farmers, they usually get really shirty at this point because I put vegetarian and vegan diet at the top of the thing. They think that's the most important. And they say, well, you know, that's going to mean the end of our business. I say, well, I might think it is, but I'm not going to say it to them. But I say the point here is that I'm trying to create a choice set that allows people to find one thing. And my ask to people when I'm giving public talks, is there one thing on here that you could do that you're not already doing? Do that this year, and then next year, is there one more thing? And I trust people at that point to be in the game, right? They've made the shift. They've stepped across the threshold. We don't need to monitor them. Just let them make further changes. 2 changes, psychologically, that's enough. So the really big bit is just getting people to choose one thing, but also to have that disagreement. I don't like the idea of doing that thing. I don't want to do that thing, but I could do this thing. And then there's some kind of metrics here to give people a kind of help with the choice set. Planting 10 trees takes 10 years to save 1 ton. Okay, might sound good, but it's much better not to cut down big trees. We all know that. So that's the kind of story behind that bit of it. So that we're leading from these things into choices for the next stage. Similar territory, we just produced this. EJ was one of the team involved in this. One of her PhD students is Nell Miles. I don't know if you're here. Are you Nell? No, do you know Nell? Okay, sorry, you were nodding with her. She was involved in this as well, so EJ was as well. We produced this thing for nature recovery, and this is simplified benefits for biodiversity, and then 4 areas where we're looking to make the point about positive externalities, that you could do something that also improves your health, reduces carbon emissions, lowers household costs, increases togetherness. And these are separated by in your garden and home, with your community, and changing how the whole system works. So we've kind of just entered the territory again from a different angle. Normally in any group, I wouldn't give both of these out. I would choose one, but you can handle 2, can't you? It's fine, isn't it? The point here is this simple thing about offering lots of choices and letting people choose, but telling them just choose one thing this year. Set the bar really low. Set it so low that it looks really easy to get people going. And then tell people to talk about it. The bit of advice I give to everybody is say, put this on the kitchen table at home and have a conversation within the family. Okay, because you can look down at that thing and you can say, I wonder what we could do together, and something emerges from that space. Some of you are just one kind of cautionary note. Some of you may know well the case of nitrogen policy in the Netherlands. I don't know whether anybody's tracked what happens with the Netherlands over nitrogen policy. Short story, then Netherlands realizes small country, huge agricultural economy, 4th largest agricultural economy in the world. People in the Netherlands really proud of dairy and livestock and farming. Okay, they've reclaimed the polders, done all kinds of stuff, put their finger in the dike over the years. You know, it's part of the myth, the mythology of the Netherlands is to do with livestock and livestock farming. But okay, we find that the nitrogen pollution from livestock is as large as the NOx from vehicles in the air, and nitrogen from livestock is polluting watercourses super seriously, eutrophication. So people go away, do the expert committee stuff, come up with a single set of solutions from government. And remember, this is a small country. It's quite close to the ground, 4 million people. It's kind of tiny, so people know each other really well. You would think they wouldn't fall into this trap, but they absolutely did. Government announces, what are we going to do? We're going to restrict the number of livestock on farms. And we're going to enforce it. Okay, no choice in the matter. That was it. We're really clever. We've done all the work. And this is the right answer. And they put that in front of people. What do you think happens? Bam! Thing blows up. Farmers drive tractors, block all the roads, block the government. Farmers are so cross, they form a party called the Farmers' Party. Farmers' Party starts to get elected into Parliament almost within the first year. They're in that year, they're anti the stuff that governments do, because that's the way they've emerged. They've had experts tell them what to do. They get captured by the right within the Netherlands. They form alliances with the AfD in Germany. They become part of the far-right movement in Europe. And that is the end of any possible nitrogen policy in the Netherlands for 50 years, 2 generations. Boom, it's gone. There's no way it's coming back, because it's now central to a political narrative of a particular party. That's what happens when we think we have the right answer, and then we don't engage with the public in a way that gives them choices. If they'd come up with, dare I say, 30 ideas to reduce your nitrogen, they might have had a chance to have begun the process and said, well, this is going to take 10 years to do this, but let's do it in this kind of way. I think we would have seen something rather different. So let me come to a concluding few kind of observations here. So another way of looking at this is to say, bring a brick, not the cathedral. That's what we need to do when thinking about these sorts of changes. Bring the small thing, okay, and let people build the big thing from it. In other words, kind of be willing to give up some kind of power and strength in all of this. It's the butterfly effect again. The challenge that we face, and I don't think any of us know what the answer is, we need to move fast, but we have to bring along the public at the same time as moving fast. So we know that we're building towards negative tipping points. We want to encourage positive tipping points, and we want it to happen fast, but we've got to pause and let it go slow enough to bring people along. That's really difficult. Okay, we have to talk it through so people understand what it is that we're trying to do. It's the butterfly effect again. Martin Luther King, 1958, said, well before civil rights movement gets going, the arc of the moral universe is long and it bends towards justice. So he kind of saw this narrative arc, right, and said, yeah, we get there, but it will take time and it might well be really messy to get there. Final two little observations. This will feel like, it does feel like at times, pushing a rock uphill forever. So there's another story that comes from ancient Greece about the myth of Sisyphus. Myth of Sisyphus pushing a rock up the hill. This is going to be hard. So Sisyphus is the good king of Corinth. He diverts water that the gods have stolen back to his people, to their gardens and orchards and their temples. And the people are really pleased. He gets a little bit carried away and he chains up Death. And Hades is really pissed off because there's nobody coming through his halls anymore. They're a bit empty because Sisyphus has chained up Death. It's kind of stopped for a while. So Zeus sends Hermes, the minor god with the gorgeous golden sneakers. And Hermes comes to Sisyphus and he says, not so fast, pal. He said, you can just push a rock uphill today, tomorrow, forever. So that's the kind of central story. And we don't see any kind of way out of it. But 2,000 years later, if you go and talk to Sisyphus today, because he's still pushing the rock uphill each day, he says, well, it's not so bad, actually. Okay, it is a big rock, but I get 3 meals a day. It's good. I'm working outdoors all the time. That's fine. It's the Eastern Mediterranean. It's pretty nice most of the year, you know, gorgeous views. And at the end of the day, when you get to the top of the mountain, there's always a lovely sunset. And then you just push the rock back down and it goes down by itself. And then he says, and you know what? Tomorrow, I know what I'm going to be doing. So we could take these stories and just turn them in certain kinds of ways to deliver a different outcome. All right, the myth of Sisyphus is written in a different way. That's me saying, yeah, okay, you know, it was not so bad. Perhaps it's not so bad pushing this rock uphill. Ursula Le Guin said, imagination is subversive. So all stories are full of imagination and encouraging imagination. Without imagination, we don't find ourselves being able to make the sort of big changes that we wish. Could I finish with a change of pace? A 1-minute reading of a poem by one of the most wonderful poets of the 20th and 21st century, Mary Oliver, American poet who died in 2019. This one's called Last Night the Rain Spoke to Me. So I'll just read this and then we'll stop. It said, this is it. Last night the rain spoke to me, slowly saying, what joy to come falling out of the brisk cloud to be happy again in a new way on the earth. That's what it said as it dropped, smelling of iron, and vanished like a dream of the ocean into the branches and the grass below. Then it was over. The sky cleared. I was standing under a tree. The tree was a tree with happy leaves. And I was myself, and there were stars in the sky that were also themselves. At the moment, at which moment, my right hand was holding my left hand, which was holding the tree, which was filled with stars and the soft rain. Imagine the long and wondrous journeys still to be ours. Thank you very much, everybody.
Fantastic, inspiring. Thank you very much, Jules. We can open up to questions, reactions. I'll quickly pass you. This is for the online audience.
Oh yeah, you need the mic so that Stephen can pick it up on here.
Hello. Hi, Jules. I see. Oh, I see.
Yeah, he's picking it up on there. Yeah. Well, imagine you're speaking into it. Yeah.
Hello. I work professionally on developing narratives for climate change, especially with people who are hard to reach.
Yeah.
And something you haven't talked about is in this kind of archetypal narrative is the role of heroes and enemies. Mm. And something which I find repeatedly with people is that they start filling the enemy role in ways that affects how they respond to climate change. Mm. And my own view is that climate change really struggles with this issue of the enemy because unlike a war or a struggle or killing the dragon or the evil witch, we're the enemy in the sense that we're causing the problem. And therefore, people have a very strong tendency to project the enemy onto anything out there, whether it's oil companies or space lasers or arsonists or
billionaires.
Yeah. You see what I mean? Yeah. So how do we navigate that? Question one, like how do we navigate that? But question two, how do we generate a story of positive transformation that is more compelling than the enemy narratives that will block it?
Well, great. I mean, those are the central questions. Thank you. You've got it. The first one is I think we perhaps have to start with ourselves, and I'll repeat a point I made earlier, which is I think we have to assume, are we big enough to assume that everybody's on this journey? It's just that some haven't yet started. And can we be generous enough to them to say, you are going to come along, but I can see that you're not yet. Okay. Now, this may not play out into the politics of change. It's that was severely tested by kind of righteous, strong, populist views on the other side that simplify things into one view and another view. But I think that's where I would start. I would start with a kind of generosity of spirit, a kind of kindness, and then to tell stories where that thing is the thing that causes the change, rather than the activism. Now, there's a lot of examples where the activism was utterly necessary. I don't think the changes to slavery or to the suffragette movement would have happened without activism that caused a lot of anguish amongst the powerful. So we can discuss that at length. But I think I would be starting from saying, let's try to kind of create a larger field of engagement of people, a bigger tent, a broad church, all that sort of metaphor, and say we're in this together, and it's not just people on one side of the aisle and on the other side. There are people in that corner doing these things, and there are people in that corner over there doing those things, and yet we're all part of the same game. And I think we just have to keep working at it. Keep kind of trying to say, yeah, that's how we do it. And then to the second point, I would say, just use lots of examples of positive change from other places and other kinds of stories like the mobile phone shift in technology, like the growth in electric vehicles, like the emergence of 8 million social groups across the South, the global South, 240 million members of land-based social groups that are changing the way that land and forest and water is being managed, a complete dramatic transformation. Can we tell those sorts of stories in a way that people go, oh, that's kind of interesting? Final point I would make to this is within Essex, where I run this Climate Action Commission, we're really interested in trying to form energy communities. So getting people within communities to start to reduce their dependence on fossil fuels, to increase their use of renewables, and then to start sharing energy within communities. So generators sell to users within communities. There are about 600 energy communities across the UK now. We've formed 10 in the last year within Essex. The number of households within each of those communities is in that 10 to 20% area, and finding it really difficult to break through into that middle 60%. So we don't really know what the answers are, but it's being able to say, this is the thing we want to happen, and over there, they're doing it. Because then all we need to do is kind of drive the vehicle and take people to see other things and put them together to talk about it. So like a model of extension that we would have used in agriculture. So don't tell people what to do, just put them together. So once we get some exemplars, we can use them in a positive way, I think. Does that kind of help? Yeah. The creativity is how you then do that, as you were saying. Imagination to make that a form of language that people understand.
Very, very quickly, you talked about there being 80% reach across Europe. What's the figure for America?
America's the same. America's the same. It's really interesting. All so-called industrialized countries are in the number that's the lowest in Europe actually is Norway now, because they've kind of banked it all, and now they're doing other sorts of discussions around it. So they're in kind of second or third order territory rather than the initial kind of change. All so-called industrialized countries are over 80%. Okay, so there's a lot of disjunction going on in people's minds. They know that, and I've worked a lot in the swamps in Louisiana, so I know that territory well. I know the oil people. I know the people who live there, the Cajuns. I know the kind of the challenges they face. And I've been in really uncomfortable situations where people have said this about climate change because they're trying to protect their oil industry. But that has changed dramatically in just 10 years. So people are holding opinions about how to vote and then what they think, and they're living with it. They're not necessarily joined up in any way. So when you talk to people, they might be voting, let's say, let me speak it, for MAGA, and saying that's the best option to make me feel better in my community. And I understand what they're saying, but you know what? I think something different, but I'm not going to mention it. I mean, people are not talking it. And there are lots of people who are not saying the word climate in anything that they do because they'll get in trouble. So that you can see how that's breaking apart. But the views are there, and I think there's a opportunity space in this next 5 years to make a lot of that. I'll leave that as an open. Thanks, you.
Thank you so much for this amazing talk. I've got a lot of questions, but I'll limit myself to one. I've been talking to an AI expert the other day, and she was very enthusiastic about the use of AI. And I pointed out that, when you do an AI search on, when your pharmacy is open, it costs about 8 times as much in carbon as asking Google the same thing. And she said, oh, don't worry about it. If you don't use AI, that's not really going to make that much of a difference, because all those data centers and the issues linked to it are a policy problem rather than an individual's responsibility. And I don't know enough
At which
to,
point you want to tear your hair out, right?
yes, of
Yeah.
course, but I don't know enough to verify if that's
Yeah.
true or not. But it seems to me that this is an approach that many people take on many issues. So, you know, why am I going to cycle everywhere if there's somebody, yeah, generating AI movies and all of that savings are going to waste? Or, you know, why am I bothering with switching to solar panels if maybe soon they'll come up with better solar panels and all houses are going to have solar panels. So what's your thought on this high level policy responsibility versus individuals' responsibility?
Really, really good. Great kind of tease there, because I mean, I think she's wrong to say it's as simple as that. But number one, I would say, if all our electricity were being produced by renewables, that wouldn't be an issue. Okay, there might be a distributional issue that these people are using it and those people can't get hold of electricity, for example. That's often widely the case, isn't it? But electricity doesn't have to come from fossil fuels. Fossil fuels are already obsolete. They will disappear and be replaced by renewables. There's just too much evidence of that to suggest the opposite. So that will happen. So AI will be driven by renewables at some point. But on the way there, that may be a bit tough territory kind of thing. I think this idea, I hear this a lot from people who say this disjunction between me as the individual and the state or the hyperstate or the international context of the world. Why should I do anything if all those people over there are doing that other thing, right? That's the sort of classic argument. You're already wrapping it into othering of people, aren't we? And people will name countries in doing that without realizing that certain countries are way ahead of where we are, as it were, in the UK. And I think it kind of comes back onto perhaps what you were saying over here about the kind of heroism of leadership, or the leadership of heroism, okay? Are you willing as an individual, are we willing as an individual to take on something we haven't done before and to take a step forward, do something different and tell other people about it? To, yes, fight the dragon, but also to go up the hill and down, you know, all of those things that happen in the kind of heroic tales. That's literally what we're going to have to do. And it doesn't happen if individuals sit at home and do nothing, or are persuaded by other people, oh, you don't need to do anything because it's up to the government or the hyperstate or whatever it is to do that thing. Say, no, it's not. It's down to us. So we're back to agency again. I'd say we're back to the agency of individuals and the belief that we can matter and make a difference. Maybe that is just a belief. Not though, is it? Individuals form social movements. Individuals come together and make technologies. They write stuff, they sing songs. Can I give one example? The singing wall in Estonia. Anybody know about the singing in Estonia? Begins in, actually in the early 80s in Poland, where the media is clamped down upon and people are not allowed to express views within the normal media system within Poland. And people take to a movement, starts with a small group of people in Warsaw. They start putting their TV sets in prams, and they push around the TV sets in their prams at 6 o'clock in the evening when the news comes on. Okay, that's all they do. They just walk around. But what they're saying is, we're not watching the news. We're walking around with TVs in prams. Right? It's such a disjunctive idea that people go, ah, really? And they get the idea, and then more people start doing it, and lots of people start, and that starts to spawn the Solidarność movement. As people come together because somebody does something that captures the imagination. Some of those people go across to Estonia and Latvia and Lithuania in 1987, 88, and people are equally cross about the state of politics within the countries. And in Estonia, they start meeting in public places and singing. They're not singing political songs because they'd be arrested for them. They're just singing songs, fairy tales, whatever it is, just singing. So nobody can actually, the authorities can't actually pin down on them what it is that they want to stop them doing. They're just singing. This eventually forms up into a singing wall that goes from Estonia to Latvia to Lithuania over 650 kilometers, where people form a big line and hold hands in 1989 and sing across this wall. There's a gap with Kaliningrad in the middle, but they somehow go across that and they sing the songs. And in 1989, Erich Honecker in Germany says, the wall will last for 50 years or 100 years. They're convinced that the Berlin Wall will stay forever. And that he says that in August, and then November it's down, it's gone, because of these kind of movements. So someone says, let's go and stand in the square and sing. Someone has the idea. And then you end up with a wall of people 650 kilometers long. I mean, amazing, what an installation. No pictures of it. So I would say that we have to believe that that's possible and tell stories about it, which I've kind of done there.
Yeah, thank you again for the talk. I had a question about the idea of heroic transformation and like change, and the way that there is still a loss associated with climate change, and there's a lot of people deal with like climate grief, and sometimes communities are even built upon the discussion of the grief or the discussion of the loss. And I was wondering, how do you engage with those spaces in this idea of let's move forward, let's get out of the hole? Sometimes, like, how do you balance also talking about the role of the whole? And so do you feel the need to, and then if you feel the need to, how do you engage?
I think definitely we need to, because we're already in the hole.
Yeah.
It looks different in different places. It looks different in the delta of Bangladesh with tides coming in. It looks different in Tuvalu. It looks different on the Essex coast, where yesterday there was a massive tide because of the full moon. And people are kind of looking out and getting scared. They're thinking, we're in a hole here, but we don't know what to do. So it looks and feels at one level different due to the substantive component of the thing. But then how we make that happen, I think this is kind of pretty nascent. It's not that well developed. We can talk to people. I do a lot of talks to people, but it's nothing like a majority of people. We've got to use other methods, online, social media, films, other kinds of ways of engaging with people to make them feel part of something. And I think that the trap, the danger is, I would say, the danger by the side of the road when we're on this journey is the temptation to tell people what to do, right? So that's the bit we've got to avoid. Story, I mean, there's a problem here because we talk about storytelling, and actually the telling is kind of part of the problem. It's story engagement. It's story kind of about the kind of complexities of the world, the challenges. I do a lot of work for wildlife trusts on helping them to kind of understand story. And we spend quite a lot of time talking about the honesty of vulnerability. Is be vulnerable, okay? In your videos, rather than talking about how brilliant you are, talk about how badly it went wrong to begin with, and then how you got out of the hole. And suddenly you get this narrative arc that's just kind of lovely. But I also know that a couple of them produced gorgeous videos of change, and even within their organization, senior people said, we can't be doing that. We can't be talking about where we made mistakes. People don't want to hear that kind of thing. So then you've got another whole debate. So actually you do, because people like vulnerability, because we're all vulnerable. We like it when our friendly institutions talk honestly about vulnerability. So I haven't got a simple answer to it, but I say this comes out of the engagement and talking about it. So it's brilliant.
I'll take one online from your collaborator, EJ.
Oh, great.
Who says,
EJ, hi.
Inspiring talk, thank you. What do you think of our role as scientists should be? To get out there, to talk directly to the public and moving into more creative modes than we're used to, or collaborating with others who are more able to speak in that way?
Well, I think I'd say both, actually, as a kind of setup there, EJ. It is both. It's kind of, there's lots of public engagement methods, café scientifiques, engaging with public, with existing institutions, talking to WIs or parish groups or to others. I think we have to put in the hard yards to go and talk to people. It's fun, it's inventive, it's creative. I always learn something different when I talk to local people, because somebody raises something that I hadn't thought of. So you go away feeling as though you've added something to the process. So I would say find ways of engagement, and of course work with others. I mean, kind of, sure. Work to find. I have a phrase which we used a lot in public engagement at Essex, the university, which was to try to find ideas that improve lives. So a really simple kind of motto, ideas that improve lives. And if you can't say that the thing that you're working on will improve your life to an audience, then people they might be just kind of, yeah, that was kind of interesting evening, but it's not relevant to me. But if you can say, this thing I'm working on is really interesting for these sorts of reasons, and this is how it's going to make your life better, you've got to do that translation bit, then you might hook them. They've got something, right? But if we don't do that bit, that's when we often fall down, I think. Ideas that improve lives.
Great. We'll take these two as the last two, and then.
Okay. Oh yeah. All right. Have to wait for the mic. Oh yes. Oh, that's right. There's an incentive to stay towards the end. No, seriously, if you need to go, that's absolutely fine.
Thank you. My question is, for journalists and media professionals, do you think that they have an ethical obligation to frame their storytelling in this more positive, productive way that you've been describing? And is that line of thinking kind of at odds with the established idea that like a journalist with integrity would present the facts as objectively and as balanced as possible?
Well, you can never tell everything in one story, can you? In fact, if you try to crowbar everything into one story, you lose the story. So good story is defined in part by what's been left out. So I wouldn't say you need to put everything into that kind of space, to present the facts objectively, because there's subjective choice in choosing the objective facts that go in the story. And the good writer is able to choose the ones that people engage with, but it's a personal choice to write it in that kind of way. So I don't think there's a kind of moral dilemma there about that. That's what you do when you're writing or making films or putting, clips on TikTok or Instagram, whatever method you use, you're presenting things. So I think we need to believe there's a kind of truth in that is kind of supportable. But I do think there's a big gap and a big desire for this, for positive things. And personally, I would say resist the temptation to say how bad things are. Like it's all terrible. All the species have died. All the moths have gone. The whales have disappeared. Kind of whatever. Just begin it with another way. Take that as given, right? And just go straight into something about getting out of the hole and see what it feels like. It feels really different. Don't even frame it with how bad it is. Just go straight in to that bit. It feels just very different. So I think that's the challenge that I would say that we face us. I would also say, look at how other people do it, this kind of storytelling. Look at comedians. Vulnerability, standing up in front of people, telling stories, making them laugh. There you will learn a lot about how other forms of storytelling work, and see if you can kind of stitch that into some of what you do. I find, I do read it, I find some of the sort of so-called climate literature just really awful. actually, really, really bad. I don't like it. I don't think it's well written. I don't think it leaves you feeling good. I know I'm looking for something with that, and other people might want something different, which is fine, but I don't like it. I'd really like them to kind of bank all of that and just jump straight into, well, here's this group trying to do this thing, and it's really hard, and they made this thing work, and then they fell in a hole, and it all went wrong, and then this happened. That's really interesting. That's the moral arc of the universe that tends towards the positive outcome. Do you see how I'm trying to kind of frame it? Yeah.
Yeah, one slide.
Yeah, hi, thank you. There was an earlier question about the role of individuals versus governments and other, I think you said higher actors. Well, I'm not sure I feel like a higher actor, but I am actually a government advisor on climate change. And I work on climate adaptation, which is preparing the country for the impacts of climate change. So how will we live with more flooding, drought, heat waves, that kind of stuff? And understandably, a lot of the climate stories are around stopping climate change happening. How do we cut our emissions, cut our carbon footprint, and so on? But the reality is that we're dialed in for a significant level of climate change that's going to happen. Better for there are margins and quite what that looks like. But we know we're on a pathway of significant change, and that means significant environmental change across the world, but also in the UK. And the science is clear on this, that we're just starting on this accelerating trajectory, and the country is not ready for it. We're built on a society of a climate that doesn't exist. So change is going to happen. We have choices around what that looks like. But this is a very uncomfortable story for a government to tell. Not this government in particular, just governments in general. They like to talk about certainty and control and reassuring messages. So what does this story look like, where we want to talk about inevitable change, and there is something uncomfortable about that, and life being different, but some agency in there as well?
Yeah, I think it's great, really good exam question, right to the heart of it. How do we choose what to put in and what to leave out? And I think it's different in different contexts. I think as you say, if I had 5 minutes with a minister, what would I say? What would be my choice, my one line? One topic. It's not going to be, I've got 10 things for you. It's a goner, isn't it? One thing. So the context is going to differ with all of those. I think I would keep turning towards where something has changed and it is positive, and there's enough known about it to be able to point towards it and say that thing is really interesting because it's done this thing. So if I could give you one more example from Essex, Yadvinder and I were talking about this earlier on. We got all the planning officers in Essex, in the 11 district authorities and city authorities, to produce a new set of guidance that they would follow and that house builders in the county would also follow. We got them to sign up to it. All the new housing in the county will be built to passive house standard. Okay. Every house will have a solar panels, EV charging point. It will have a heat pump. It will be high levels of insulation and cooling. The estimate that we have of the energy costs in those houses is 3% of current energy costs. Okay, that's it. End of story. It's 3%. Now, government might decide, oh, this is a great opportunity to load some more costs on, which seems to be a mad approach in my view, because we need to make these things cheap so they happen quickly. There's still a stock of permissions, planning decisions that have been made that are still going to get built out under the old rules. So people are still going to stand around and say, I thought you said they were all going to be passive houses. They're not. I say, no, sorry, because that was a decision that was made in 2016 and they still haven't built to it. But all the new stuff and the new permissions will be to passive house standard. So that would be my message, not message, story, 3% of cost. Would you like to live somewhere where your energy costs are 3% of your current energy? Maybe, actually. Maybe. And then you say, well, then you're going to do these other things. You might have some views about them, but actually, this is the thing. So perhaps that's another kind of angle, that we kind of search around for good stuff from other places. What are they doing in Denmark? What are they doing in Ireland to these things? What's happening with nature recovery over here? Can we say use that as a story here to create better kind of adaptation scenarios? Well, yeah, we've got lots of examples, haven't we? So I think that's, so if I had my 5 minutes with Mr. Miliband, I think I would probably be saying that. Put it into Great British Energy and let's have some more of it. Thank you. Thank you to folk online as well. Great. So the reception afterwards. So I'm hanging around. So happy to take any further observations or questions. Yeah, good. Yeah, thanks. Great.